When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Widow's Hollow. User: 1Bubba027. Posted July 17, 1997.
I was 9 the first time I saw Widow's Holler. Uncle Thomas pulled up in his dented Ford Ranger, window down, Marlboro hanging from his lip, and George Jones on the radio like he owned the damn station. He leaned out and hollered, "You coming or what, boy?" I didn't even check with Mama. I just grabbed my boots and jumped in. I knew I wasn't supposed to go. Mama made that clear every time the holler came up. "That's where the dead stay," she'd mutter, hanging laundry on the line. "Ain't nothing out there but ghosts and rot." But Thomas didn't give a flip about ghosts or rot, or what Mama said for that matter. He'd been in and out of Bellhurst more times than I could count, always showing up with a cooler full of beer and stories about bar fights or snake-bit dogs. He was the kind of uncle you didn't brag about, but you damn sure wanted to be like. We took the back road. Gravel and potholes all the way, past the old sawmill and down where the trees lean over like they're whispering to each other. The air smelled like pine needles, old dirt, and something sour underneath it all. No birds, no bugs, just the crunch of gravel and the tape deck warbling. Now, Widow's Holler ain't on any map. You gotta know where it is. It used to be a proper little settlement, 5 families, they say, back in the day, and then the Spanish flu came through in 1918 and didn't leave nobody behind but the dead. Ain't been nobody living out there since. When we rolled up to the gate, if you could call 2 rusted posts and chain a gate, Uncle Thomas tapped the brakes, lit another smoke, and pointed his chin at the sign. The wood was gray and peeling, but you could still read it. Eleanor's Rest. "She was the last one out here," he said. "Didn't leave when the others ran." I asked why she stayed, and he just blew smoke and said, "You'll see her if she wants you to, not before." He did not say another word after that. The place looked like something from a black and white western that got left out in the rain. Moss-covered stones, bits of wood from where porches used to be, a well so old it looked like it was made by hand. Trees hung in tight, even the wind didn't want to go through. He pointed to some rubble and said that was the Watkins place, said the boy hanged himself in the barn after his folks passed from the flu. "They say the rope snapped," Thomas said, "but not before he was already gone stiff." That was about all he said, and we didn't stay long. Years went by, and I moved off, got married, got divorced, moved back in '95 when Mama got cancer and needed help. Ended up working nights at the county library, mostly running the microfiche machine and helping folks who thought they were related to Robert E. Lee. One slow Tuesday night, I got curious and pulled the old files on the holler. Turns out Eleanor White was real. Lost her baby and her husband to the flu. Instead of leaving like everyone else, though, she stayed, buried the bodies, tended the sick, died sometime in December, and no one found her till spring thaw. Some preacher buried her back in the holler, said she deserved to rest with the others. But that's when the story started. Folks said there was a light in the woods. Always the same, right after sunset, never bright, just a soft yellow glow like a lantern swinging slow through the trees. In 1963, a boy fell into the old well, busted his leg bad, said a woman in white helped him climb out. When the search party got there, he was alone, dry and sitting upright like nothing ever happened. In the 80s, a pair of teenagers got lost trying to find a spot to drink beer and make out. They said they saw a porch light in the woods, followed it, and ended up by the well. Then the light flickered out. They ran like hell. Now, nobody ever said she was mean, just still around. So last fall, I drove back there. Didn't tell nobody, just got my keys, packed a flashlight, and left after sundown. The road was worse than I remembered. Washed out in spots, soft in others. My tires damn near got stuck, but I made it to the gate. It looked the same. Same posts, same chain, same crooked sign. I stepped through, flashlight still off, just me, the dark, and a little voice in my head saying I was a dumbass. The well had not changed a bit. It was still sitting there like an open mouth in the ground. I stood and looked at it for a few minutes, listening. Not a damn sound around. And then it hit me. That cold shift in the air, like somebody just stepped past you but didn't bother saying hi. And then I saw it. Down the path, past the trees, a soft yellow light. Didn't bob like a flashlight or spark like a fire, just glowed. Steady, calm. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I did not follow it. Didn't need to. I nodded once and said, thanks, like maybe she was listening. And then I turned around and went home. I don't think Eleanor wants folks messing around out there, but I think she likes being remembered. Maybe that's all she's waiting on. Someone to see the light and say her name. So I'm saying it now. Eleanor White, widow, nurse, last soul of Widow's Holler.
Subject, the wreck of the Santa Maria. User, F. Respondanon. Posted, May 2nd, 1996.
There's no way to know who saw the bodies first. Some people say it was bass fishermen out on Penobscot Bay who thought they'd landed the catch of the day, but instead pulled in the waterlogged remains of a middle-aged man. Others say it was retirees in a walkers group strolling out to Rockland Lighthouse, their morning exercise interrupted by a mass of tide-driven corpses surging against the breakwater. Some even say the dead simply appeared in the middle of the town square that day, right in front of a group of third graders on their way to tour City Hall. It's been almost 20 years now, so for anyone who wasn't there when the survivors of the Santa Maria washed up in Rockland, Maine, the legends, whichever you believe, have far outpaced the truth. The hell of the thing is, I was there on that day in 1972, and the truth is far stranger than any of the stories people tell about it. It started as a normal day. I was in the Coast Guard at the time, stationed in Rockland. CWO was Larry Everman, as good a man as I ever served under. Larry knew everyone in and around the station, their names, what they did, and made sure to ask about their lives. When he retired in '85, he took a lot of that station's heart with him. In '72, though, Larry was still running things when the call came in from Dave Bennett over at Owl's Head Lighthouse. His voice, usually relaxed and deep, had a tightness I'd never heard. Dave said that he'd been at the waterline walking the family wolfhound when he'd seen something nightmarish washed up on the rocky shore, 4 bodies, 2 of them children. He'd attempted resuscitation, he said, but they were beyond help. Bodies washing ashore means a wreck, so after notifying Rockland PD of the bodies at Owl's Head, we put some calls on the radio to other nearby stations. None of the other units had unresolved maydays, and the sea had been like glass for the last 2 weeks, so we drew a blank across the board. Our only real option was to start examining tide tables to determine how far these people could have drifted, and from there take a swing at where their boat had gone. The next call to come in over the radio was from Cheryl Baker, who worked on the harbor at the North Haven ferry dock. Her voice was barely audible through crackling distortion. "Hap, it's Cheryl. We need someone down here at the dock, like right now." More bodies, I thought. Had to be. Where was this goddamn boat? I grabbed the mic. "Cheryl, if what I think is happening, we know. Owl's Head has already called it in. Better to keep it off an open channel." More static. I thought she was gone, but then I could hear her voice as if she was holding the mic away from her mouth. Sir, it's going to be okay. Help is on the way." She came back to the microphone. "Hap, I don't know how Owl's Head could possibly see these people from out here, but if you know, why haven't you already sent someone?" A shiver ran through me. "Cheryl, are you saying there are survivors? Survivors? Maybe. Hap, all I know is I've got people here who need help. You need to send someone now." When I spoke to Cheryl later, she said she'd heard the voice of a small child calling for help and followed the sound down to the waterline. There, she'd seen a group of men, women, and children amongst the dock pilings, some of them gasping for breath, some hunched over sobbing, and others not moving at all. In total, there were 26 people who came out of the water that day. They ranged in age from toddler to late 50s, and after being evaluated by doctors at Knox General, were found to generally be in good health, aside from shock and grief. Parents had lost children. Children had lost parents, and every other variation in between. We didn't have a complete count of the dead by the time the survivors were seen to, but in the end, we located 37 bodies in and around Penobscot Bay, bringing the total number of people involved to 63. If any of this had been allowed to become part of the historical record, it would have been the biggest maritime disaster in our bay since the burning of the PSS Royal Tar in 1836, when 32 people lost their lives. things began to unravel during the interviews. Larry sent me and Terry Anderson over to Knox General to help Chief Chris organize the survivors. In the meantime, multiple boats had been sent into the Penobscot to scour for the ship that these poor people had wrecked from. A ship that, according to each interview I sat in on, was a passenger ferry called the Santa Maria. The problem with that was that no such ferry existed in the Maine State Ferry Service, nor was there any boat with a name even remotely close. To make it even stranger, the ferry survivors claimed to have been en route to Rockland from an island in the Gulf called San Germain. When we showed them a map of the coast, every single adult pointed to either North Haven or Vinalhaven, but claimed they were a single piece of land connected by Ajax bridges. That last part was said in a way that suggested the function of such a thing was obvious, and they were puzzled when we asked what it meant. As best as I could piece together, it's some kind of floating bridge, but when one of the survivors, a man who called himself Timothy Flight, claimed to be a civil engineer on San Germain and tried to describe how the technology works, his explanation quickly moved out of our realm of understanding. The agreed-upon explanation as to how the Santa Maria's passengers ended up in the water was an electrical storm, far in excess of what their weathermen had predicted. Timothy explained that their weather station could track cloud patterns for more than 100 miles, but this had seemingly come out of nowhere, a maelstrom of purple lightning and howling winds. The sea had been whipped up into swells that dwarfed the small passenger ferry before finally capsizing it halfway between San Germain and the mainland. He said that the final wave had come so quickly they hadn't had time to cast for help. That was his word, cast, and so when the boat flipped with a roar of steel and water, he thought they were going to die out there. Not a single one of the surviving passengers remembered the storm passing or how they ended up on the rocks underneath the dock. They remembered hitting the water, then the next thing they knew, they were leaning against wooden pilings in the shade, throwing up seawater. By late afternoon, a massive search and rescue operation had completely failed to recover a single sign of any boat called the Santa Maria, swamped or otherwise, and that's when the government boys took over. No one, not Larry, not Chief Chris, not any of the search and rescue personnel, knew who had called these jokers, but their suits and sunglasses were undeniably of the federal variety. Outside, I saw a line of black vans that I assumed were for the survivors, an assumption I'd verified when one of the feds, who introduced himself as Marback, said that they were taking custody of the passengers. We tried to fight them. Not only were these people clearly traumatized, but something very strange was going on, and we were going to need them to sort it out. Not to mention the morgue and frozen reefers full of bodies they would have to help us identify. Marback didn't argue. He just said that the decision was out of his hands and that the government was taking custody of everything related to the Santa Maria, including any paperwork we had so far created on the wreck. I was fuming. The feds don't give a rat's ass about Maine any other time, but now they wanted to push us around? Larry tried rattling cages higher up in the guard chain of command, but we got a one-word reply: cooperate. Watching that lineup of scared people being herded into those vans was one of the worst moments of my life. Wherever they were going, I knew one thing for sure. There wasn't going to be any understanding or mercy shown to them. They represented something Uncle Sam didn't want anyone else to know, and that meant they were no longer people. They were assets. As I watched the line of black vans pull away from the hospital, guilt at my inability to help these people sat heavily in my stomach. A moment later, the first van cut a hard right, slamming into the curb fast enough for one of the tires to jump it. The others swerved behind it, careening left and right as they tried not to slam into one another. Brakes squealed, tires leaving black rubber smears on the asphalt as one by one the vans ground to a halt. The suited G-men got out of the van, the bewilderment of their faces obvious despite their sunglasses. The back of each van was torn open, and then the reason for their shock was obvious to all of us. The survivors of the Santa Maria, every single man, woman, and child, were gone. The feds took all of our paperwork as promised, but there was nothing else for them to bring back to whatever godforsaken office they'd come from. In addition to every single living Santa Maria passenger vanishing into thin air, the bodies of the dead had done exactly the same, taking with them their clothing, personal items, anything that might have started its day on the ferry that didn't exist. Over the years, I've talked to some of the other people who worked with the survivors that day and learned a few more things. Some of the adults commented on how sour the air was and developed minor coughs. The children were apparently unusually intelligent, able to understand the questions asked by doctors without needing to have anything explained to them. Conversely, however, they were baffled by references made to popular children's shows, books, or movies. A nurse told me that one of the children had even asked what a movie was. As I said before, the legend of the Santa Maria has long outpaced the truth of what happened that day. Depending on who you ask, the passengers were either abducted by aliens or were aliens themselves, or even stupider things I won't dignify by listing them here. Mind you, even though I grit my teeth when people say those things, maybe they're right in a different way. I have no way to explain any of the events we experienced, so maybe an allegorical explanation is better. Maybe those people were aliens from another world, just one that we also happen to occupy as well.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.